What happens when a wounded Marine would rather bleed than let a stranger touch him? And the one person who can reach him is the youngest nurse in the room. On a rain-soaked midnight in Oceanside, California, the ER doors burst open, and Gunny Cole Mercer is wheeled under cold trauma lights, jaw-locked, hand pressed to his ribs, refusing meds, refusing help, refusing to surrender an inch of control. Around him, monitors hum, boots squeak on wet tile, and every second tightens like a wire. But this is not just a story about injury. It is about pride, memory, military code, and the one silent detail that changes everything. Stay with me to the end because this story hits harder than it first appears. And before we begin, like the video and tell me where you're watching from. To understand why that question lands like a blade in a silent room, you have to step back a few minutes before the gurney hits Bay 3, before the monitors start singing their cold electric warnings, before a wounded Marine turns a civilian trauma center into a test of nerve. Mercy Harbor Trauma Center sits just off the coastal road in Oceanside, California, close enough to Camp Pendleton that the hospital staff has learned to read the difference between an ordinary injury and the kind of pain that arrives wearing discipline like body armor. The building itself is plain from the outside, all concrete and glass and rain-slick curb lines, but inside at midnight it has a rhythm that feels almost sacred to the people who work there. Bright light falls hard on polished floors. Elevator doors open and close with mechanical indifference. Portable monitors hum. The overhead speakers crackle with codes that change the direction of footsteps in an instant. No one wastes movement. No one wastes words. The night shift has settled into its own breathing pattern. A little after midnight, a child with a fever is finally sleeping in pediatric observation. A contractor with a crushed thumb is swearing softly into a paper towel while a physician assistant examines the nail bed. Down one hall, a woman in her 60s grips the rails of a bed and tries not to cry while she waits for imaging results. Behind curtains and doors, small emergencies rise and fall like weather. In Trauma Bay 3, Sadie Quinn stands at the supply cart and resets the room from the previous case. She works with a calm that looks natural from a distance and costs her something up close. Gauze goes on the left. Saline flushes on the right. Gloves in pairs not loose. ECG leads checked, not assumed. A suture tray in the lower drawer, suction tubing coiled without twists, portable ultrasound plugged in and charged. She lines things up by reach and sequence the way some people make a bed after a nightmare. Neatness as control. Control as a way to keep fear from becoming visible. Her scrub top is dark navy. Her hospital badge is clipped straight. There is a faint indentation across the bridge of her nose from a mask she wore too long in the earlier rush. She looks young enough that patients sometimes ask if she is in school. She has learned to answer with a smile that gives them nothing and everything at once. 11 days. That is how long she has officially worked trauma at Mercy Harbor. 11 days is long enough to know where the chest tube kit is stored without thinking. Long enough to tell which attending prefers concise updates and which one wants a full picture before acting. Long enough to stop feeling lost in the hallways, not long enough to stop feeling watched. The older nurses never say rookie out loud. They do not have to. It lives in quick glances in how they check her tray after she leaves the room, in the way they say, "Nice work," as if surprise is hiding under the compliment. Sadie does not resent it. She understands the mathematics of trust better than most people her age. In a room where seconds matter, no one owes confidence to a stranger. Charge nurse Tessa Morales pushes through the bay with a chart in one hand and a half-finished coffee in the other. Tessa has been working emergency medicine long enough that even her exhaustion looks efficient. "You restocking for a hurricane?" Tessa asks. Sadie keeps her eyes on the monitor leads she is sorting. Just making sure Bay 3 behaves itself. Rooms don't behave. People don't either. Sadie glances up. "That your official trauma philosophy. It has kept me employed." Tessa moves on, already answering a question from another nurse before she reaches the doorway. Sadie lets herself breathe once deep and quiet. The bay smells faintly of antiseptic plastic, old electricity, and rain blown in every time the ambulance doors open downstairs. She knows what kind of place this hospital becomes after dark. Mercy Harbor does not turn theatrical when things go bad. It narrows. The room shrinks to essentials. Voices flatten. Hands get steadier. The luxury of emotion disappears until later, and sometimes there is no later. Sadie reaches for a fresh pack of alcohol swabs and pauses when she hears the low electric crackle from the radio at the central desk. The paramedic patch comes in thin at first, then sharp. Mercy. Harbor, this is County Medic 4. Inbound with one adult male active duty Marine. Late 30s, suspected thoracic trauma following vehicle rollover during field training. Patient is alert-oriented. Refusing analgesia. Refusing IV access guarding left side. Shallow respirations. Tachycardic. Blood pressure soft. ETA 3 minutes. The words active duty Marine change the temperature at the desk more effectively than any alarm. Not because military patients are rare here. They are not. Oceanside breathes in step with the base. Marines come through for broken hands. Concussions, burns, torn ligaments, dehydration, panic attacks. They call something else, wives in labor, sons with asthma, fathers who drink too much after the third deployment. The uniforms are familiar. The haircuts are familiar. The silence is familiar. But active duty with thoracic trauma and treatment refusal is different. A medic at the desk mutters, "Great." Dr. Ethan Blake appears almost instantly, as if the radio call summons him from the walls. He is in his mid-40s, sharp-featured sleeves, rolled trauma shears clipped to one pocket. A man whose composure never looks performative. He reads the room once and says, "Who has 3?" Tessa is halfway down the hall with another patient and points without turning around. Quinn reset it. Blake's eyes land on Sadie. She already knows the look. It is not doubt exactly. It is assessment. "I can take Bay 3, she says. The room gives her half a second of silence. Blake steps closer. He's refusing treatment in the rig. That means he's either scared, stubborn, hypoxic, or all 3. "I know." He escalates, "I take over. You can stand in the room if you want." One corner of Blake's mouth shifts, not quite a smile. "I was planning on it." Sadie pulls gloves from the box and snaps them on. What do we know besides possible chest trauma? Rollover on a training range road. Walked away from the vehicle. Delayed collapse. That part bothers me. It bothers me too. Blake looks at her for another beat, then nods. Good. The bay changes shape around that decision. A respiratory therapist wheels in additional oxygen tubing. A tech checks suction. Someone places an extra blanket on the warmer, though no one says why. Comfort is often a silent calculation. Sadie tightens the blood pressure cuff on the rail, checks the portable pulse oximeter, opens a sterile package halfway, and stops. She hates half-opened, sterile packages. They look like uncertainty. Outside, rain sweeps across the ambulance lane in silver bands under the floodlights. Tires hiss over wet pavement. Reflections tremble across the glass doors and smear into the polished floor. Somewhere beyond the receiving entrance, a siren cuts off mid-wail. The radio crackles again with an update. Patient remains combative with interventions. No loss of consciousness. Deformity not obvious. Breath sounds diminished, left lower. Repeating patient refusing medication and access. Combative. Sadie hears the word and rejects it on instinct. The field uses it too broadly. Combative can mean violent. It can also mean cornered. It can mean in pain, proud, triggered, drowning in old memory. It can mean the patient still thinks he has a job to do, and everyone in the room looks like an obstacle to that job. She has seen that look before. Not in this hospital. Not in these scrubs. Years ago, before nursing school, before California. Before she learned how to speak softly in trauma bays and still be obeyed, Sadie Quinn wore desert tan and navy blue instead of hospital-issue cotton. She learned early that fear takes many forms, and discipline is often one of them. She learned that pain can make men mean, but so can shame. She learned that some of the toughest patients do not fear dying as much as they fear being handled. Most of all, she learned that control is never a small thing to someone who has lost it before. She does not think about those years often during a shift. Thinking is a luxury that comes later. But the radio call has already turned some old key inside her, and by the time the ambulance backs into the receiving bay, she has that old, familiar stillness in her chest. The one that does not erase nerves, only arranges them into something useful. The side door bangs open before the paramedics even wheel the patient in. 2 Marines enter ahead of the gurney, wet from head to toe, their uniforms darkened by rain. One is broad-shouldered early 30s, corporal stripes visible even in the harsh light, jaw tight with the effort of not interfering. The other is younger, leaner, with the tense watchfulness of someone trying very hard to look composed because the man on the incoming gurney would despise panic. Security lifts a hand to stop them from crowding the room. They're with the patient, Sadie says. Blake gives a short nod, and security steps back. The older Marine wipes rain from his brow with the back of his hand. Corporal Luis Vega. That's our gunny coming in. Blake says what happened. Vega answers fast-clipped practical. Training range East Road. Utility vehicle clipped a washout and rolled into a ditch. Gunny Mercer got everyone out before anybody else could even unbuckle. Said he was fine. Wouldn't let us call it until he went white as a sheet and nearly hit the gravel. The younger Marine adds, he walked about 40 yards on his own. That is not reassuring. Blake's eyes narrow. Did he hit his head? No, sir. Lose consciousness? No, sir. Any crush injury? Don't know. He won't let anybody touch him. That line settles over the bay harder than the rain. Sadie glances toward the receiving doors just as the gurney rolls in. Gunnery Sergeant Cole Mercer arrives like a man entering hostile territory and refusing to show it. He is tall, even on his back, built hard shoulders wide under a torn field jacket darkened with rain and something darker than rain along the left side. Mud has dried at the edges of his boots. There is dirt under one thumbnail, probably from clawing himself out of the vehicle or bracing against the ground. His face is pale beneath the tan, not with weakness, but with the controlled pallor of someone spending all his energy on not giving the room what it wants from him. His eyes move first, not wild, precise. Doorways, corners, hands, instruments, badges, exits. He takes in the entire bay in one sweep and never once looks lost. The paramedic gives report while the gurney rolls. 38-year-old male restrained driver in rollover self-extricated, delayed onset chest pain and respiratory distress. No medication given per refusal. Vitals in transport. Heart rate, 126 pressure trending down sats 91 on room air. Respiratory rate, 28 and shallow. Guarding left lower thorax. No obvious external bleed beyond minor lacerations. Cole's hand grips the side rail with enough force to blanch the knuckles. The other hand is pressed hard into his left ribs as if he can physically hold the pain in place by pressure alone. Name Blake asks. The answer comes rough but immediate. Gunnery Sergeant Cole Mercer. Sadie steps into his line of sight before anyone else can crowd the bed. Mr. Mercer, I'm Sadie Quinn. I'm your nurse tonight. His eyes flick to her badge, then to her face, then to her hands. Don't cut the jacket, he says. There is no wasted sound in it. No drama. Just an order shaped like a boundary. Blake says, Gunny, I need to examine the injury. You can ask. The room goes quiet in the way good trauma rooms do when a patient says something that matters. It is not the refusal alone. It is the structure inside it. You can ask. Not no, not never, not get away from me. Ask. Sadie hears the difference and stores it. Another nurse reaches for the zipper of his jacket. Cole turns his head a few inches and the nurse stops, as if she has stepped close to a live wire. No one here is frightened of him, but they are alert now in a different way. This is not a patient who can be managed through momentum. Push too hard, and the room loses him. The fight will not be loud, it will be absolute. Blake remains steady. Gunny, your pressure is low and your breathing is not good enough. I need access to your chest and side. If I suspect internal bleeding or a collapsed lung delay becomes a bad idea. Cole's gaze never leaves his face. Then tell me what you're doing before you do it. Sadie feels something settle into place. Not relief. A pattern. Consent is not the problem, control is. She moves to the side of the bed where he can see her hands clearly. All right, she says, I'll tell you every step before I do it. He looks at her again longer this time. People often underestimate what a trained eye can read in a second. Cole is not only assessing if she is competent, he is deciding whether her calm is real, whether she startles easily, whether she is one of those nurses who smiles too much when they are nervous, whether she will mistake compliance for trust. Sadie has had men twice his age test her with silence before. She lets the silence sit. Behind him, the monitor is clipped in. A rhythm appears across the screen fast and uneven enough to bother everyone in the room. Sadie says I'm placing the blood pressure cuff on your right arm. No movement from him. She takes that as permission and slips it on. It inflates. He does not flinch, but she sees the tendons in his neck tighten. Pulse oximeter on your finger. She shows him the clip before she uses it. This time, when her knuckles brush his skin, his whole body reacts by a fraction. Fast. Involuntary. A recoil so small another nurse might miss it, and so immediate no one could fake it. Not aggression. Conditioning. That gets stored too. Vega, still at the doorway, looks like he wants to say something but knows better. Briggs has gone pale around the mouth. Sadie can almost hear what both of them are thinking. This man has carried them through situations with less light and fewer supplies. Seeing him on his back under fluorescent glare is wrong in a way they cannot yet speak aloud. Blake checks the monitor. Pressure 92/58. Tessa, passing the doorway with another chart, mutters, "That's not pretty." Cole hears it and dismisses it with his face. Sadie reaches for the ECG leads. These are stickers. Right shoulder first. His eyes stay on her. She places the lead. Then another, then another. Each touch is deliberate. No wasted contact. No soothing language. Men like Cole do not trust comfort offered too early. It feels like strategy. He trusts procedure. He trusts competence. He trusts restraint. The machine finds his rhythm and begins translating his body into numbers. Heart rate high. Oxygen trending low. Respiratory pattern tight and shallow. Not enough left lower expansion. Blake puts the stethoscope in his ears and moves to the left side. I'm listening now. He listens long enough that the entire room understands the result before he speaks. Diminished at the base. Cole says I can breathe. Blake answers you can, but not well. Sadie sees the flash in his expression then. Not anger. Offense. The kind that comes when someone states a truth he already knows and hates. She takes a pair of trauma shears from the tray and holds them where he can see them. I need to get under the jacket. Number. The word lands flat and hard. Then you can unzip it yourself, she says. That catches everyone slightly off guard, including Cole. For the first time, he looks at her as if revising something in his head. His left hand stays on his ribs, so he uses the other to pull the zipper down several inches. The movement costs him. Breath leaves him in a sharp, controlled hiss. He stops, jaw clenched, and for one brief second the room sees how much pain he is actually carrying. Sadie does not comment on it. She simply steps in and parts the fabric enough to visualize the injured side without ripping away his dignity. Bruising already blooms dark and ugly along the lower left ribs. One area sits higher than it should not by much, but enough to suggest fracture. The skin is mottled with dirt and rainwater and a thin line of blood from a superficial cut. Not the worst injury she has seen. Potentially worse than it looks. Blake sees it too. Portable chest X-ray. Ultrasound now. CBCCMP lactate type and screen. The tech moves toward the line cart. Cole stops him with a look before a hand ever reaches his arm. No needles. Blake says that is not negotiable. Cole's eyes turn to stone. Watch me. The room holds. Sadie steps half a pace between them, not blocking, just altering the current. Cole. It is the first time she uses his first name. His gaze shifts to her immediately. You walked away from a rollover, she says. That tells me your pain tolerance is ridiculous and your instincts are worse. Vega actually looks down to hide a reaction. Briggs blinks. Tessa, now fully in the doorway, arches an eyebrow as if she has decided to stay and watch this new nurse either succeed brilliantly or lose the room in flames. Cole's mouth moves almost imperceptibly, not quite a smile, not quite disbelief. That your clinical assessment. It is the clean version. You always talk to patients like this, only the difficult ones. He breathes in too fast and the breath stalls halfway. Pain slices across his face before discipline smooths it over. Sadie lowers her voice. You do not have to hand over control. But if your lung is compromised or you are bleeding internally pretending you are fine, buys you nothing. His eyes flick to the monitor, then back to her. He's calculating. Not because he doubts the medicine. Because accepting it means admitting dependence to a room full of strangers. She knows that look. She has seen men in hot zones insist they can still walk while blood fills one boot. She has seen men try to stand on fractures because the alternative made them feel useless. Pride is often described like vanity by people who have never needed it to survive. In rooms like this, pride is something else. A last possession. A flag planted in the ground of the self. Sadie keeps her hands visible and still. No one is pinning you down, she says. No one is surprising you. But I need one thing from you. Honesty. He studies her for a long moment. Rain beats softly against the high windows. The monitor ticks through his pulse like a metronome. Ask, he says, one word. A change in the room all by itself. Sadie nods. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad when you breathe deep? I'm not doing pain scales. Then describe it. He exhales through his nose once. Like a cinder block under the ribs, and a knife when I inhale. Better, she says. Any dizziness? Some. Nausea. Number. Did you black out at any point? Number. Any numbness in the arms? Number. Any history of collapsed lung? Number. Any blood thinners? Number? Blake is already assembling the picture from the answers. Sadie hears it in the shift of his breathing and the way he reaches for the ultrasound probe. The line nurse comes close again with the IV kit. Cole's hand comes off the rail so fast that two people in the room tense at once. Sadie turns without looking away from him. Hold. The nurse stops. Cole lets the hand settle again, but now the whole room has seen it. Fast, protective response. No bluff in it. Sadie says no one comes from outside his sight line. Blake looks at her. You making the rules now? In this bay for this patient, yes. A dangerous sentence from someone 11 days into trauma. But Blake takes it in, weighs it, and says nothing. That silence is its own kind of permission. Sadie leans closer to Cole enough that the noise of the room falls away. Do you know what worries me most right now? He says nothing. The fact that you are still this composed with pressure that low, one beat, means either this is less serious than it looks, or you've lived in worse pain than most people can imagine. His eyes change then. Not softer, not warm, just more direct, as if she has finally spoken a language he recognizes. Vega shifts at the door. Gunny, maybe just let them check you. Cole does not even look at him, not helping Vega. Yes, Gunny. Briggs stands with his jaw set and hands clasped hard enough to whiten the knuckles. He is learning something tonight about the man he follows and the cost of watching a strong person become vulnerable under fluorescent light. Sadie reaches for the portable ultrasound and wheels it closer, letting the machine speak for her. Concrete. Visible. Useful. I'm putting gel on the left side, she says. Cole gives a short nod. The probe touches bruised skin, and his back muscles seize. The image flickers onto the screen in gray and black. Sadie watches Blake's face as much as the monitor. A good nurse reads the doctor. A great one reads the room. Blake takes the probe from her and scans lower. Possible small pneumo. I need labs and imaging to confirm extent. Cole's stare hardens. Possible is not enough for a needle. Sadie answers before Blake can. Fair. Blake glances at her sharply. She does not care. Trust built too fast breaks too fast. Cole notices that too. For a few seconds, nobody pushes. That is when the room becomes dangerous in a new way. Not because anyone might explode, because stillness can calcify into refusal if someone does not move it carefully. Sadie straightens, adjusts the monitor lead near his collar, and in doing so feels his eyes follow the exact position of her hands, the set of her shoulders, the steadiness in her breathing. He is measuring her in ways that have nothing to do with medicine. She understands that without fully naming it. This is not only about whether she can start an IV. It is about whether she can stand in a room under pressure without making his injury feel like surrender. She has been in rooms like that before. Her right sleeve has shifted upward slightly from the work enough to expose the edge of the ink on the inside of her forearm. Most people at the hospital never ask about it. In scrubs, it is usually half hidden and irrelevant. Tonight, under trauma lights and rain shadow and too many eyes, it feels suddenly more visible than skin. She pulls the sleeve down without thinking. Cole sees the motion. He says nothing, but she catches the brief narrowing of his gaze. Not curiosity for curiosity's sake. Recognition, looking for confirmation. Blake steps to the foot of the bed and folds his arms. Gunny, I can give you pain medication and have your side scanned in under a minute. No meds. You like feeling this? I like knowing what's mine. Blake lets out a quiet breath through his nose. Pain is not a moral achievement. No, Cole says. It's information. That line lands in Sadie's chest with unsettling precision. Of course it is. To men trained in uncertainty, pain is data. Weakness in the left leg means one thing. Pressure in the chest means another. A change in hearing, a delay in reaction time, heat at the base of the spine blood where it should not be. Pain is a map, and they survive by reading it early. She speaks before she can overthink it. Then read this correctly. Information says your body is losing the argument. Silence again, this time longer. The monitor keeps up its indifferent pulse count. Rain rides down the glass in narrow silver lines. Out in the hall, a stretcher rolls past. Voices move, phones ring. Someone laughs too loudly at a joke that was probably not funny. Normal life presses right against the walls of Bay 3 and does not enter. Cole shifts 1 inch to relieve the pressure under his left side and immediately regrets it. The pain hits hard enough that it shows at the edges of his mouth before he locks it down. Sadie sees it. Vega sees it too, and this time his voice drops the rank and the formal edge. Cole. Cole finally turns his head toward him. It is the first time he has looked anywhere but the staff. Vega says, "You got us out. Let them do their job." For a moment, something old and heavy passes across Cole's face. Responsibility. Memory. The strain of being the one people survive behind. He looks back to Sadie. "Talk me through the IV," he says. No triumph touches her expression. None at all. She just nods once. Single line in the right arm. Small catheter. I clean the skin, I place it. I draw blood, I secure it. 1 stick, if you hold still, you can watch the whole thing. And no pain meds unless I say yes. Correct. Blake says nothing. Tessa says nothing. The entire room rearranges itself around that tiny opening. Sadie takes the kit from the nurse who had nearly lost the room and sets it on the tray herself. She opens each item in front of him. Alcohol prep, tourniquet, catheter, vacutainer tubes. No surprises, she says. Cole gives 1 short nod. She ties the tourniquet high on his arm. The muscle there is dense and corded veins not obvious under the skin and tension. She taps once, finds a line, cleans the site. Needle in on 3, she says. 1. She inserts on 1. It is not cruelty. It is strategy. Anticipation creates resistance. clean movement reduces it. The catheter slides and blood flashes, tube fills dark red. Cole's eyes flick to hers, startled despite himself. "You said 3. I lied." Vega actually barks out a laugh this time, then clamps his mouth shut as if he has committed a crime. Even Briggs lets out a breath that almost sounds human again. Sadie secures the line with careful tape. "But I got it first try, so we're both winning." Cole looks at the IV for a long moment, then at her face. "What else are you lying about?" "Only my charming personality." That almost smile appears again at the corner of his mouth, gone as quickly as it came. The room exhales around them, not because the crisis is over, but because the first wall has a crack in it now. Blake steps back toward the bedside and says more to the medicine than the ego, portable X-ray en route. We keep moving. Sadie checks the IV site, adjusts the pulse oximeter, and reaches to straighten the monitor lead near Cole's shoulder. Her sleeve shifts again. This time she does not catch it in time. And this time, Cole Mercer sees enough to know that whatever is on her forearm is not random. In Bay 3, the rain keeps tapping the glass. The monitor keeps counting every strained heartbeat, and Cole Mercer makes it clear with one sharpened look that no one in that room is getting anything from him for free. No one in that room was getting anything from him for free. Sadie knew that now, and because she knew it, she stopped trying to win the room all at once. The IV line sat clean in Cole Mercer's right arm, taped down neatly against skin gone pale under the trauma lights. Blood filled the first tube, then the second, then the third, dark and quick, carrying the information his body had refused to speak aloud. Sadie labeled each one with steady hands and passed them off to the tech without taking her eyes off him for long. In Bay 3, attention had become a kind of currency. He noticed where it went. He noticed who spent it carelessly. Cole's chest rose and fell in short measured pulls, each breath controlled like an order. The bruising along his left side had deepened from red to a spreading violet-black ugly under the unzipped field jacket. Mud still clung in dry flakes to the seams of his sleeve. Rainwater glistened in the folds of the stretcher sheet beneath him. He looked less like a patient than a man interrupted on his way somewhere important. Blake studied the ultrasound images again, then the monitor, then Cole. "I want a portable chest film now." An X-ray tech appeared at the door, with the machine already humming. Cole's gaze cut toward it. "How many people are you planning to stack in here?" "As many as it takes to keep you from drowning in your own chest," Blake said. Vega shifted his weight near the doorway. Briggs kept both hands clasped in front of him so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Neither Marine said a word this time. They had learned, at least for the moment, that too much concern made Cole lock down harder. Sadie adjusted the IV tubing and kept her voice even. "This will take less than a minute. We sit you forward just enough to get the plate behind you. Number." It came out instantly before she even finished. Sadie nodded once, as if he had answered a routine question. "Then I need to know why no." He turned his head slightly toward her. The lines around his mouth had sharpened. Sweat stood faintly at his temples now, not enough to drip, just enough to shine. Because sitting forward means shifting weight left, and that hurts. He let out a dry breath that might have been a laugh in another life. "You're catching on." Sadie glanced at Blake. "Can we angle the board from the right and keep him supported?" The X-ray tech answered first. "Tighter shot, but yes." Blake gave a nod. "Do it." Cole noticed that too. The room was not steamrolling him. It was bending around his pain without making a speech about compassion. That mattered more than any reassurance they could have offered. Sadie stepped closer to the bed where he could see her hands. "I'm putting one hand behind your right shoulder. The tech will slide the plate in from the other side. You tell me if the pain spikes. You'll know if it spikes. Humor me anyway." She waited for the smallest sign from him. He gave her one, a shallow dip of the chin that cost him pride, and maybe a little dignity too. She did not treat it like surrender. She just moved. Her palm came behind his shoulder blade. The muscle there was hard as cable, every inch of him braced before the pain even arrived. "On my count," she said. 1, 2. He shifted on 2 this time, perhaps because he had learned she lied when it got the job done. The movement dragged a sharp sound from him, not a cry, not a groan, just a rough involuntary exhale that tore out of his throat and vanished the moment it existed. Vega looked down. Briggs stared at the floor tiles. Sadie held his weight for 1 second longer than necessary, long enough for the X-ray plate to slide into position. "Hold," the tech said. Cole held. The machine clicked. Then it was over. Sadie eased him back without rush. When he settled against the mattress again, his eyes were closed for half a heartbeat. When they opened, he looked angry at himself for closing them at all. "Done," she said. He drew one careful breath. That all. For this minute. His stare sharpened at the phrasing, but he was too busy pulling oxygen to challenge her. The X-ray tech rolled the machine out. The bay narrowed again. Blake scrubbed a hand across his jaw while he waited for imaging to upload. Tessa passed by the door, took in the tableau with one efficient sweep, and kept moving. Down the hall, someone called for transport. A child cried somewhere beyond the curtains. Mercy Harbor kept doing what hospitals do best. It moved around, suffering without stopping for it. Sadie checked the blood pressure cuff as it cycled again. 88/56. Worse. Blake saw the number over her shoulder. Pressure's drifting. Cole looked at the screen as if the numbers belonged to someone else. Sadie stepped to the IV pump and opened fluids a little wider. "You feeling lightheaded now?" "A little. You tell me when it becomes more than a little." He kept watching her. "You ask everybody questions they already know the answer to. Only when I want to see if they lie." His eyes flicked once toward Vega and Briggs. "You getting honest answers from me?" "Enough to keep working." "That good enough for you?" "It has to be." The answer seemed to land. He looked away first. A respiratory therapist entered with nasal cannula tubing looped across one gloved hand. His SAT is 90. Cole saw the tubing, and his shoulders went rigid again. No. Blake had had just enough patience for one battle at a time. That one is not optional. Cole started to push himself up on one elbow, and pain slammed through him so fast the motion died halfway. His hand flew to his side, fingers digging hard along the bruised ribs, as if he could physically shut down the injury by force. The monitor jumped. Briggs stepped forward without meaning to. Vega caught his sleeve and yanked him back before Cole could see it. Sadie moved first faster than anyone else, one hand out not to touch him, but to stop the room from closing in. "Everybody hold." Her voice cut clean through the bay. The respiratory therapist froze. Blake froze. Even the monitors seemed to soften for a beat, though of course they did not. Sadie looked only at Cole. "No one is putting anything on your face." His breathing was short now, sharp at the edges. She could see the effort it took to keep his jaw from clenching shut. "Then what are you asking for?" "Nasal cannula. Under the nose. Nothing over your mouth. You keep talking. You keep seeing the room. And if you hate it, I take it off after 30 seconds. He stared at her, searching for the trap in the offer. "There's always a bargain with you," he said. "No, there's always an explanation." One long second, then another. Finally, he said 30 seconds. The respiratory therapist started toward him. Sadie took the tubing from her instead. "I've got it." She showed him the soft plastic first, then looped it gently in place. Her knuckles barely brushed his cheek. Even that tiny contact sent a brief tension through his neck, gone almost as soon as it came. A reflex again, a body remembering something his face refused to reveal. "There," she said. "Breathe as you are. No deep breaths yet." He looked absurdly dangerous with oxygen under his nose, as if the tubing itself offended the architecture of him. The SAT crept up 1 point, then another. Blake glanced at the screen. Better. Cole said nothing, but the fight in his shoulders eased by a fraction. Blake stepped to the foot of the bed as the X-ray image loaded onto the monitor beside him. He clicked once, twice enlarged the left lower field. Sadie watched his expression change very slightly. Not alarm. Confirmation. Hairline fractures lower lateral ribs. Small left pneumothorax. No obvious hemothorax on plain film, but I do not like that pressure. Cole heard every word. How small? Small enough that I'm not cutting you open this second. Large enough that you stop pretending this is just bruising. A dry silence met that. Blake looked at Sadie. We need a CT if he stays stable enough for the trip. Cole turned his head. I'm not going anywhere. Sadie answered before the room could harden. You are if walking out means collapsing in the parking lot. I can walk. Vega finally lost his patience. Gunny, with respect, no, you can't. Cole's eyes snapped to him with enough force to make Briggs straighten automatically. Vega did not back down, but the air between them tightened. Sadie stepped into that line of tension before Rank could turn it into something uglier. Luis. It surprised Vega enough that he looked at her. Not now, she said. He inhaled once and nodded. Yes, ma'am. Cole registered that too. She had just redirected a Marine corporal in front of him without posturing, and the corporal had listened. Something unreadable passed through his expression. Respect, perhaps. Or recalculation. Blake checked the time, then the monitor again. Quinn, I want another set of vitals in 2. Call CT and warn them we may be coming. If pressure keeps sliding, we stay put. Sadie nodded and moved to the charting station mounted on the wall, entering numbers with quick, precise taps. She could feel Cole's eyes on her even with her back turned. Most patients looked away once they felt the room was under control. He had not decided that yet. Not entirely. Every movement remained a test. When she returned to the bedside, he was still studying the room as if memorizing the location of every tray, every sharp object, every person with authority. The fact that his pulse was high and his pressure low had changed none of that. The discipline in him ran deeper than blood loss. She set a small emesis bag within his reach. You say nausea earlier, you tell me. No nausea. Fine. She reached for a warm blanket from the heater and paused. Blanket. He looked down at the field jacket still draped across his torso like a scrap of uniform left between him and humiliation. Keep the jacket. All right. She folded the blanket at the foot of the bed instead of covering him. He noticed. He noticed everything. A lab runner came for the blood tubes. Sadie handed them over. The bay settled into one of those deceptive quiets that only happen in emergency rooms where 10 things are moving underneath the surface and everyone pretends to breathe normally. Blake left to make a call to CT. Tessa disappeared down the hall toward another room. The respiratory therapist slipped out after adjusting the oxygen flow. For the first time since arrival, Bay 3 held fewer bodies. That changed something. Cole's attention softened at the edges, not enough to call it trust, but enough to let exhaustion show through the discipline. He looked at the ceiling, then the fluorescent light above the bed, then back to Sadie. You always this calm. Number. He seemed almost surprised by the answer. Could have fooled me. She checked the IV site again. Calm is easier than panic. For you, maybe. For anyone. Panic just burns more oxygen. A thin silence passed between them. Briggs shifted near the door. Gunny, do you need anything? Cole did not look at him. Need you to stop asking that. Briggs flushed and went still again. Sadie glanced at the younger Marine. Maybe 22, maybe younger if you caught the angle of the face instead of the posture. He looked like he had not yet learned what to do with helplessness. She recognized that too. Hospitals were full of people discovering the limits of their usefulness. Briggs, she said quietly, grab him some water swabs from the supply rack. The kid jumped at being given a task. Yes, ma'am. He left immediately, grateful for purpose. Cole looked at her. You did that on purpose? Yes. Why? Because standing there watching you hurt isn't helping him either. He considered that. You read people fast. Occupational hazard. The line almost invited another question, but he let it pass. Vega, still nearest the doorway, folded his arms and leaned back against the wall. Water still darkened the shoulders of his uniform blouse. He won't say it, but he hates hospitals. Cole's eyes cut to him. Vega. I know, Gunny, I'm being unhelpful. Sadie glanced between them. He hates hospitals or he hates not being in charge inside them. Vega gave a short, humorless laugh. Those might be the same thing. Cole stared at the ceiling. You all done discussing me like I'm not here? Sadie answered without apology, no. That dragged another almost smile to the edge of his mouth. It vanished before anyone could claim it. Briggs returned with the oral swabs and hovered unsure where to stand. Sadie took one, moistened it, and held it where Cole could see it. Mouth swab, not water, just enough to cut the dry taste. He accepted that with a small nod. She passed it into his hand instead of doing it for him. Another choice, another piece of himself left intact. He swiped the moisture across his lower lip and exhaled slowly. Better. Briggs looked relieved, as if he had personally solved a tactical problem. The blood pressure cuff cycled again. 86/54. Sadie saw it, so did Cole. This time, he did not pretend not to care. His eyes narrowed on the number, and she could almost watch the calculation in his head. Pain, blood loss, collapsed lung transport risk. How much worse it would get if he kept pushing against the room. Still think you're walking out? She asked. He did not answer. She took that as progress. Blake came back in with the same controlled focus he had worn from the start. CT is ready if we can keep him stable through transport. Cole's voice was rougher now. If. Blake stepped closer. Here's the problem, Gunny. Small pneumo can become a bigger one. Internal bleed can hide. Your pressure is telling me I don't have the full picture yet. And if I don't go, Blake's face stayed flat. Then I keep you here until I either convince you or you crash hard enough to remove the need for convincing. The honesty of it settled over the room like cold water. Cole looked away first. Sadie saw the conflict in him then with painful clarity, not simple refusal, not macho theater. Something more disciplined and more damaged than that. He needed to remain the one making decisions, even injured, even cornered, even with the evidence of his body collecting on screens around him. If that authority disappeared, some older alarm inside him woke up. She had seen that too. In men who had spent too long in places where a split second of helplessness could get somebody killed. In patients who would rather suffer than be held down by strangers. In service, members who heard instructions as threats the moment pain stripped them of context. She leaned against the counter just enough to lower herself into his line of sight without looming. What exactly is the part you can't stand? Blake gave her a look, but said nothing. Cole's breathing stayed careful. His eyes stayed on hers. You asking professionally. I'm asking because I need the truth. The room went quiet around the question. Vega looked at the floor. Briggs looked anywhere but the bed. Blake crossed his arms and let the moment live. Cole's jaw flexed once, twice. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Still controlled, still careful, but lower now, closer to something stripped raw. I don't like people behind me. No one answered immediately. Not because the statement was confusing, because it explained too much at once. Sadie let the silence hold. All right. That all you've got? No, that's all I'm saying out loud. He watched her for any sign of pity. He found none. She went on. No one comes at you from behind. No one touches you without calling it. You keep your eyes on the room. If you need a countdown, you get one. If you need the truth, you get that too. Blake uncrossed his arms. We still need CT. Cole looked from one to the other. And if I say no? Sadie answered this time, not the doctor. Then I keep doing what I'm doing until your body makes the argument louder than your pride. That should have angered him. Instead, it seemed to do the opposite. He looked almost tired for the first time, as if the effort of holding every boundary in place was beginning to weigh more than the injury itself. He turned his head toward the ceiling again. You know a lot about pride for a civilian nurse. The words were tossed lightly, but there was a probe inside them. Sadie reached for the cuff tubing and straightened it. I know enough. That mean you were military? Vega looked up. Briggs did too. Sadie kept her attention on the equipment. It means you should save your breath. He let the question drop, but not fully. She could feel it remain in the room waiting. A few minutes passed. In the slow grinding way minutes pass inside trauma bays. Another set of labs came back on the computer. Lactate mildly elevated. Hemoglobin not catastrophic, but not comforting. Blake reviewed them with the expression of a man adding up risk in silence. Cole stayed still because stillness cost less. His hand remained near his left side, not pressing now so much as guarding fingertips spread across the bruised fabric of the jacket. The oxygen under his nose continued to offend him, but he had stopped fighting it. That alone told Sadie how much the pain had climbed. She checked the chest rise again, left side lagging, not dramatically. Enough. You need to cough, she asked. Number. You should. Number. That wasn't a request. His eyes opened. You planning to wrestle me into it? Not my style. He watched her a second longer. Then don't push. I'm not pushing. I'm keeping your lungs from turning lazier than you are. Vega looked down to hide another reaction. Briggs outright choked on a laugh and tried to turn it into a cough. Blake pretended not to hear. Cole stared at her. Then despite the pain, despite the bay, despite the blood pressure and the bright lights and the absurd fact of himself on a hospital bed under civilian care, a real expression broke through for the first time. Brief, small, unwilling, but real. It changed his whole face. There was something younger underneath the discipline. Something that made the years of service and the walls around him feel not thinner exactly, but more expensive. Hard won, maintained at cost. Sadie saw it and looked away first out of respect. Briggs, emboldened by the human moment, stepped closer with another mouth swab. Gunny. Cole gave him a tired, sidelong glance. You're still here. Yes, Gunny. Then stand where I can see you. Briggs moved at once to the front corner of the bed instead of hovering behind. Cole gave the smallest nod in acknowledgement. It might have meant thank you in another language. Sadie filed that away too. Patterns, needs, angles of safety. Everything mattered. The cuff cycled again. 90/58. Slightly better. Blake read the number and decided not to comment. Improvement in a trauma room was fragile. Naming it too soon felt like daring fate. He looked at Cole. Pressure bought us some time. Not much. Cole answered with his eyes closed. How generous. Blake checked the x-ray one more time. I want to move before the next drop. Sadie glanced at the hallway, then back to Cole. Transport team can clear the route so no one crowds you. He opened his eyes. You volunteering to stand between me and the rest of the hospital, if needed. You that confident. No, she said, just that stubborn. This time he almost laughed for real, and the laugh punished him immediately. His face tightened, breath catching halfway in his chest. Sadie stepped close without touching him. Easy, don't chase air. He obeyed before he could think about whether obedience offended him. Slow inhale, slower exhale. Another. When he looked at her again, something had shifted. The edge was still there. The vigilance was still there. But threaded through it now was recognition. Not personal yet. Not trust. Just the beginning of respect born from competence instead of rank. Blake noticed it too. Quinn, if he agrees to transport you, ride with him. Cole looked at Sadie, then at Blake. I haven't agreed. No, Blake said. But if you do, I prefer the person you've decided not to hate. Sadie kept her face neutral. Vega turned away to hide a smile. Briggs failed to hide his. Cole gave Blake a long, flat stare. You always this charming. Blake shrugged, only with difficult Marines. The room eased a fraction around that. Enough for breath. Enough for the next decision. Sadie reached up to secure the ECG lead that had started to peel near Cole's shoulder. I'm fixing this lead. He watched her hand move. You narrate everything. You asked me to. I asked you not to surprise me. Same difference. She smoothed the adhesive with 2 fingers. Her sleeve had ridden up again from the angle, exposing a little more skin along the inside of her forearm. She had not noticed. Cole had. his gaze fixed there for half a second longer than it should have. Sadie felt it before she understood it. The shift in his attention. The specific stillness of someone looking not at her but through her into some association the rest of the room could not yet see. She lowered her hand, but not before the fluorescent light caught a sliver of dark ink beneath the cuff of her scrub sleeve. Cole's eyes sharpened. "Hold on," he said. Not loud, not rough, just sudden and different from anything he had said before. Sadie stilled. The room did too. Cole did not look at the monitor now, or the doctor, or the X-ray on the screen. He looked only at the inside of her forearm, where the edge of the old black ink had surfaced under the hospital light like something remembered from another world. Sadie followed his gaze. Then very slowly, she understood why the room had changed. Sadie followed his gaze. Then, very slowly, she understood why the room had changed. The edge of old ink showed beneath the cuff of her scrub sleeve just a thin black curve. At first, nothing anyone else in Bay 3 would have recognized without context. To most people, it would have looked like any tattoo half hidden under hospital fabric. To Cole Mercer, staring at it through pain and low blood pressure and the thin hiss of oxygen under his nose, it was something else entirely. It was familiar. Not in the casual way symbols become familiar from posters or T-shirts or flag decals slapped onto truck windows. Familiar in the way a man knows the outline of the thing that kept him alive. Familiar in the way memory strikes before thought can catch it. "Hold on," he said again, quieter now. Sadie did not move. Cole's eyes stayed on the inside of her forearm. "Roll that up." There was no threat in his voice this time. No resistance. No rank. Just a strange gravity that pulled every person in the room toward the stillness. Blake looked from Cole to Sadie and did not speak. Vega frowned slightly. Briggs leaned in without realizing it. Sadie let out one slow breath. Then she reached with her free hand and folded the cuff of her scrub sleeve back above the elbow. The tattoo came into full view. Dark black lines softened just a little by time. An eagle globe and anchor worked into the shape of a unit crest. Beneath it, small, clean lettering and numbers. Not flashy, not decorative, not recent. It had the weight of something carried, not displayed. Cole looked at it as if the trauma bay had dropped away around him. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Sadie heard the change in him before anyone else did. His voice had gone lower not from weakness, but from recognition. A locked door inside him had opened just enough to show there was more behind it than defiance. She kept her tone level. "After my first deployment." Vega blinked. Deployment. Briggs looked from the tattoo to Sadie's face and back again. The idea did not fit neatly with the rookie nurse they had walked in expecting to see. Cole never looked away from the ink. "That crest matters to you." "It does." He drew a careful breath and it still hurt. Still caught slightly on the way in, but now the pain was no longer the center of the room. "Which unit?" Sadie met his eyes. "2nd Battalion, 5th Marines." The words fell into Bay 3 with the force of a dropped tool. Vega straightened off the wall. Briggs stared openly now. Blake said nothing, but his attention sharpened. Cole's face changed by half a degree. Nothing dramatic. He was too controlled for that. But the look in his eyes shifted from suspicion into a more dangerous kind of focus. He was verifying. "Say it the right way," he said. Sadie did not hesitate. 2-5. Something in the room tightened and released at once. Cole stared at her for another long second. "You were not Marine Corps." "Number." "Then why are you wearing our dead on your arm?" The question was not cruel. It was precise. A challenge drawn along old rules. In another room from another mouth it would have sounded aggressive. Here it sounded like a demand for truth from someone who had earned the right to ask for it. Sadie looked at the tattoo once, then back at him, because partial truth would fail here. A man like Cole would hear the missing pieces louder than the words she spoke. "My brother served with 2-5, she said. "Corporal Mason Quinn." No one moved. The monitor kept ticking through Cole's pulse, bright green against black. Rain tapped the high windows. A phone rang somewhere down the hall, and went unanswered one ring too long. Cole searched her face. She nodded once. Kilo Company. Vega looked at Sadie again with new eyes, trying to place her in a world that had just widened under his feet. Cole's jaw tightened. I knew a Quinn. Sadie said nothing. He went on slower now, like a man stepping through memory with a wound in his side and a room full of strangers around him. Loud, fast smile, bad handwriting. Carried instant coffee in his cargo pocket like it was contraband. The corner of Sadie's mouth moved before she could stop it. That sounds like him. Briggs glanced between them, trying to understand whether he was witnessing coincidence or something heavier. Cole looked back at the tattoo. He was your brother. Yes. Was. The single word sat between them. Sadie folded her arms loosely, not defensive, just holding herself still. He was killed in Helmand. Vega lowered his eyes. Briggs did the same. Blake remained near the foot of the bed, silent and respectful enough to let the room belong to the people inside the history it had suddenly uncovered. Cole took that in without flinching, but his gaze drifted for just a second past Sadie, past the lights somewhere farther out than Bay 3. When he spoke again, his voice had roughened. Marja. She nodded. For the first time since he had come through the doors, the look on his face was not command, not pain, not resistance. It was grief recognized in another person. Sadie could see it, could feel the moment reach back through years neither of them had expected to touch under the fluorescent lights of a civilian hospital. My brother died before I shipped out, she said. I joined the Navy after. Went corpsman, Greenside. Vega drew in a breath. You were a doc. Not for long enough, she said. Cole's eyes lifted to hers, there. Again, not a full question. Just a demand for the missing point on the map. Sangin first, she said. Then a stretch outside Kayaki. That did it. The room was still the same room. The monitor still beeped. The oxygen still flowed. Blake still had a possible transport and a slipping blood pressure to worry about. But Bay 3 no longer felt like a civilian space with a difficult patient and a young nurse. It felt like a place where two people had accidentally uncovered the same war beneath different uniforms. Cole swallowed once. It looked painful. Who was your senior corpsman? Chief Ramirez. He stared at her for a beat. No kidding. You knew him, knew of him. A pause. Everybody knew of him. That was true enough to need no embellishment. Men like Ramirez moved through stories long after they left the unit names spoken in smoke pits and barracks and aid stations attached to moments of competence under pressure that became legend because people survived them. Sadie let the silence do its work. She had no intention of filling it with explanation. The truth was enough. Cole looked at the tattoo again, then at the IV in his arm, then at the chest leads the oxygen the room. His posture changed in a way so small, another nurse might have missed it. The hand on the rail loosened. Not completely, a fraction. Blake saw it too. He took one step closer, careful not to break whatever had shifted. Gunny, I still need answers from your body. This connection does not change the medicine. Cole kept his eyes on Sadie, I know. You need CT if you stay stable enough for transport. If not, you stay here and we manage what we can in Bay. Still looking at her, Cole asked, You staying with the bed? Sadie answered before Blake could. Yes. And no one comes from behind. Yes. And nobody touches me without saying what they're doing. Yes. Blake glanced at her, then back at Cole. You have my word. Cole's breathing remained shallow, but the rigid resistance had thinned. Sadie could feel it in the air more than she could see it. The room was no longer fighting him. He was no longer fighting every hand inside it. Vega stepped a little closer. Gunny. Cole finally looked at him. Vega seemed unsure whether to smile salute or stay quiet. In the end, he did none of the three. You good. Cole's expression hardened just enough to become familiar again. Define good. It was the driest thing anyone had heard from him all night. Briggs let out a short, startled laugh, then looked ashamed of it. Sadie did not smile, but some tension left her shoulders. Humor in trauma rooms was rarely about amusement. It was a sign of oxygen returning to places where fear had been living. Blake checked the monitor again. Pressure is 90/57. Better than before. Not good, better. He looked at Sadie. One more bedside ultrasound before I decide on transport. She nodded and reached for the machine. Cole watched her set it up. You said after your first deployment. I did. How many? 2. You leave before nursing school. Yes. Why nursing? The questions came in the same clipped rhythm he had used since arrival, but they no longer felt like resistance. They felt like a man assembling the identity of the person standing over him piece by piece, making sure the bridge he was crossing would hold his weight. Sadie spread a fresh towel over his bruised side before applying gel. Because after the second deployment I realized I wanted to keep doing the work without carrying a rifle in the same zip code. That got the shadow of another expression from him. Not amusement this time. Recognition. Fair answer. The gel was cold on his skin. His muscles tightened under it, but he did not protest. Sadie placed the probe, carefully narrating each move. Cold gel. A pause. Pressure. Another pause. Scanning low left. Blake leaned over to view the image beside her. He kept his hands off the probe at first, letting her hold the contact. The image flickered gray and black over the small screen. Plural line, shadow. Motion reduced on one side. Cole watched Sadie's face more than the screen. He seemed to have decided that reading her was the faster route to the truth. She kept her expression neutral, but not blank. Still there, she said quietly. Blake took the probe and scanned one rib space higher. Small. Maybe slightly larger. Hard to say from bedside. Cole absorbed that without visible reaction. Sadie wiped away the gel with a folded towel, slow enough not to jolt him. I need to check the dressing on the IV. He nodded. No argument. The room noticed. Trust in a trauma bay is never announced. It is measured in what no longer needs fighting. Briggs shifted again, finally unable to contain the question written all over his face. Ma'am, you were really with Marines. Sadie secured a corner of tape and glanced toward him. I was attached to them. Vega looked at the tattoo again. That's why he clocked it. Cole answered without looking at either Marine. No, I clocked it because people do not wear that by accident. His tone carried none of the earlier hostility, only certainty. Sadie checked the flow on the IV and adjusted the blanket at the foot of the bed. Not everyone reads details under pressure. Cole's eyes flicked to her. That is exactly when you read details. A line from a world she knew. A rule dressed as an observation. She met his gaze and understood the offering inside it. Blake straightened from the ultrasound and made his decision. We transport for CT now while he can still argue with me in full sentences. Cole opened his mouth to object, but Sadie beat him to it. Same arrangement as here, she said. I stay at your side. Vega and Briggs where you can see them until the scanner room. Staff announces every move. No one behind you without warning. Cole held her eyes for a long second. You have a habit of negotiating terms before I answer. You have a habit of needing them. That hung in the room. Then his fingers loosened once more on the rail. Fine. Vega looked like he had just watched a locked steel door open with no visible key. Blake was too professional to show relief, but it came through anyway in how quickly he turned toward the doorway. Call CT. Tell them we are moving now. Portable oxygen with transport. Keep the line open. Bring suction. The room came alive again. A transport orderly appeared with a fresh portable monitor. The respiratory therapist returned to switch oxygen delivery for the move. Tessa stopped in the doorway, took one look at the shift in atmosphere, and lifted an eyebrow at Sadie. Later that look promised. Sadie ignored it. She had no time for later. She leaned close enough to Cole that the others would naturally give them space. We are moving you to the scanner on my count. The turn is going to hurt. I know. You tell me if you start to black out. I won't. That was not a request. His eyes narrowed. You always this bossy once people stop fighting you. Yes. Something in that answer satisfied him. The transport team locked the side rails and positioned the portable monitor. Blake checked the chest rise one more time. Vega and Briggs moved instinctively to the front half of the bed where Cole could keep them in sight. The orderly reached from behind to unlock the wheel, and Cole's shoulders instantly went hard again. "Behind you," Sadie said at once, one hand lifting just enough for him to see it. "Wheel lock only." The tension eased. Blake caught the exchange and filed it away. So did Tessa. In emergency medicine, good staff learned as much from what prevented panic as from what treated injury. "Ready," Sadie said. The team moved the bed. Cole sucked in a breath through clenched teeth as the motion sent pain across the fractured ribs and through the small pocket of collapsed lung. Sadie kept one hand on the mattress near his shoulder, visible steady, not touching him unless needed. "You're all right," she said. "I'm in a hallway in a hospital," he muttered. "That is not all right." Vega almost smiled. Briggs did smile briefly before remembering himself. They rolled out of Bay 3 into the brighter corridor, where hospital life flowed around them in half-open doors. Clipped voices passing carts, elevator chimes, the smell of coffee gone stale in paper cups. A child in a waiting room chair looked up from a blanket fort made of her mother's coat and stared as the Marines went by. An elderly man with an arm in a sling moved aside with quiet respect when he saw the uniform on the bed. Cole tracked every face. Even weakened, even hurting, he still cleared the world like terrain. Sadie walked at the side rail. "No one behind your right shoulder. We are passing a doorway on the left. Elevator ahead in 10 feet. You narrate hallways too." "Yes?" Annoying. Effective. The transport orderly smothered a smile. In the elevator, the space got tighter. Metal walls, bright lights overhead, a stranger's reflection at every angle. Sadie saw the shift in Cole immediately. Claustrophobia was not the word. It was not fear of enclosed space. It was the old hostility toward blind angles and trapped movement sharpened by pain. She moved so he could see the doors and her at the same time. 40 seconds, she said. He nodded once. Vega and Briggs stood shoulder to shoulder near the foot of the bed, rigid and silent. Blake watched the monitor. The respiratory therapist held the oxygen tank steady. Nobody fidgeted, nobody talked. When the elevator opened to radiology, the relief in Cole's face was so brief it would have been invisible to anyone who did not already know to look for it. The CT suite was colder than the bay, cleaner in a sterile machine-dominated way. White light sealed doors the low, expensive hum of equipment. A tech in dark scrubs stepped forward with a welcoming smile that faded instantly when she felt the room she was entering. Blake handled it first. "This is Gunny Mercer. Chest trauma, low pressure, small left pneumo. He needs a scan with minimal repositioning and no surprises." The tech nodded, professional enough to leave ego out of it. Understood. Sadie stepped in before anyone could touch the bed. "He needs visual on every person in the room. Call all contact before you make it." The tech looked at Blake, got confirmation, then nodded again. Cole's eyes remained on the scanner. He had gone quieter since leaving the bay, not weaker, more inward. Pain does that once the adrenaline thins and movement taxes what the body has left. Sadie leaned close. "You still with me?" He looked at her. "Depends. On what?" "On whether you are staying in this room." "I am." He searched her face as if checking for any gap between the words and the person saying them. Satisfied or close enough, he let his head rest against the pillow for 1 second. "Then I'm here." They transferred him from the hospital bed to the scanner table with careful coordination and no wasted instruction. Sadie counted it out. Blake stabilized the injured side. Vega and Briggs had to stay just outside the shield line, which Cole disliked on sight, but Sadie kept herself in the slice of vision he could still use. The move hit him hard. He hissed in a breath and the monitor jumped. His hand clamped once against the edge of the scanner table before slowly releasing. "Almost there," Sadie said. His eyes stayed open, locked on her. The tech placed positioning blocks with verbal warning before every contact. The machine whirred to life. The room narrowed further. Scan takes a few minutes, Sadie said. You hold still. You say that like I have options. She did not answer. She only stayed where he could see her. The table moved. The scanner swallowed him inch by inch beneath its white circular frame. Not enclosed fully, but enough to make the room feel farther away. Sadie held his gaze as long as the angle allowed. Blake stepped to the monitor station to review images as they populated. Vega stood with his jaw clenched hard enough to pulse. Briggs stared at the floor. The techs worked quietly. The machine spun and clicked and translated injury into slices of light. Sadie waited. When the scan finished and the table moved back, Cole let out a slow breath that sounded like the end of a long internal command. You still here, he said. Yes. He looked at her forearm again, at the dark old unit crest above the rolled cuff. You kept the tattoo. My brother hated tattoos. That caught him off guard. Then why get it? She held his stare. Because memory is not the same thing as permission. For the first time all night he smiled without fighting at first. Small, crooked, gone in a blink. But there, Blake was already studying the images. His voice, when it came, was calm and clipped back to medicine, back to the narrow lane that mattered. Pulmonary contusion. Small pneumo confirmed. No major hemothorax. Splenic injury looks unlikely. Rib fractures as expected. We can manage this upstairs if he behaves. Cole turned his head. Behaves. Blake looked unimpressed. That was the medical term. Even the CT tech smiled at that one. Sadie stepped in while the atmosphere was still loose enough to hold it. We are taking you back to Bay 3 for pain control, repeat vitals, and transfer orders. Cole's eyes moved from Blake back to her. Pain control. Low dose, explained in advance. Another beat, another calculation. But it was no longer a battle between strangers. He nodded. One clean nod. Sadie did not make anything of it. She simply reached for the rail. All right. The trip back to the trauma bay felt different, though. The hallway had not changed. Same lights, same squeak of wheels, same rain tapping faintly against distant windows. But the tension no longer crackled at every touch. Cole still tracked every angle, still disliked every blind corner, still controlled his breathing like a man rationing something precious. Yet the resistance had changed shape. It was no longer a wall. It was a boundary with a gate in it, and Sadie now had the code. In Bay 3, the room received them with waiting supplies and cleaner air, and the familiar geometry of the bed, the monitor, the cart, the whiteboard on the wall. Tessa had reset part of the space while they were gone. A fresh line of syringes sat capped and ready. New gauze, fresh tape. Ordered calm. Cole settled back onto the mattress with an exhausted precision that made it clear how much harder the trip had hit him than he would ever admit. Sadie adjusted the oxygen. Blake reviewed the scan findings one more time for the chart. Vega and Briggs returned to their places where Cole could see them. And in the space that had once been occupied by pure resistance, something quieter had taken hold. Something built not from reassurance but from recognition. In Bay 3, the room received them with waiting supplies and cleaner air and the familiar geometry of the bed, the monitor, the cart, the whiteboard on the wall. Tessa had reset part of the space while they were gone. A fresh line of syringes sat capped and ready. New gauze, fresh tape. Ordered calm. Cole settled back onto the mattress with an exhausted precision that made it clear how much harder the trip had hit him than he would ever admit. Sadie adjusted the oxygen. Blake reviewed the scan findings one more time for the chart. Vega and Briggs returned to their places where Cole could see them. And in the space that had once been occupied by pure resistance, something quieter had taken hold, something built not from reassurance but from recognition. Sadie could feel it in the way Cole no longer tracked every hand with the same edge of suspicion. He still watched. He always would. But the room was no longer enemy territory. It was a place under assessment, and for now it had passed. Blake set the chart tablet down and faced the bed. All right, CT confirms a pulmonary contusion, small left pneumothorax, and multiple non-displaced rib fractures. No major abdominal bleed. No splenic rupture. That is the good news. Cole looked at him through half-lidded fatigue. You hospital people always hide the bad part behind that phrase. The bad part is that pain will keep you from breathing deep enough if we do not manage it, and the pneumo can still get worse. It got worse already. Not enough to put a tube in you yet. Cole's gaze moved to Sadie for half a second, then back to Blake. Yet. Blake did not soften it, yet. Sadie checked the blood pressure cuff as it cycled again. 92/58. Still low. Better than before. Not enough for anyone to relax. Blake picked up one of the capped syringes and held it where Cole could see it. Low-dose fentanyl. Small dose. Enough to help your breathing and keep your blood pressure from diving every time pain spikes. Cole looked at the syringe with the same old aversion, though it had lost some of its force. How low? Blake answered without looking away. 25 micrograms. And if I do not like what it does, you tell us. Sadie stepped to the bedside. You are still making decisions. This just gives your ribs less leverage. Cole let out a faint breath through his nose. The monitor traced a fast, jagged line above his shoulder. He was tired enough now that the effort of objecting had become visible. Fine, he said. 25. Blake handed the syringe to Sadie without comment. Cole noticed that too. She cleaned the IV port, connected the line, and paused where he could watch every movement. Small push. You may feel warm first. He gave a short nod. She administered the medication, slowly, eyes moving between the syringe, the IV site, and his face. At first, there was nothing. Then the set of his jaw eased by a notch so slight it might have meant nothing to anyone but her. The hand guarding his left side relaxed not completely, but enough that his fingers uncurl from the fabric of the jacket. Vega saw it and quietly exhaled. Briggs leaned one shoulder against the wall for the first time all night. Cole took a cautious breath, then another, testing the change as if it might be a trick. The second one reached deeper than the first. Pain still flashed across his face, but it no longer owned every inch of the movement. Sadie watched the chest rise, better. Cole stared at the ceiling. I hate that you are right. You can hate it upstairs when your lungs are behaving. That nearly got another smile out of him. Nearly. Blake reviewed the oxygen saturation. 94 with cannula. Respiratory rate still high. We will repeat the chest film before transfer. Cole closed his eyes for 1 second and opened them again. You enjoy repeating yourselves. Only when Marines make me earn a simple admission. Blake stepped aside as the X-ray request was called in. For a few minutes, Bay 3 settled into a thinner kind of motion. Sadie flushed the IV line and taped down the corner that had lifted during transport. The monitors continued their indifferent work. Tessa passed the doorway, caught Sadie's eye, and lifted 2 fingers in a silent question. Everything under control. Sadie answered with a small nod that meant close enough. The rain outside had softened. The hard drumming against the windows was now a light tapping, as if the storm had shifted farther inland. Cole turned his head slightly on the pillow. Quinn. Sadie looked up from the chart. What? Your brother, Kilo Company. Yes. He talked too much. That caught her off guard. She let out a quiet breath that was almost a laugh, and not quite one. That sounds accurate. He had this terrible habit of singing over the radio when he got bored. Vega grinned despite himself. Briggs looked openly curious now, drawn into a world where his gunny was speaking in something other than orders and hard refusals. Sadie rested one hand on the rail off-key, violently. That did it. A real laugh slipped out of her before she could stop it short and low and gone almost immediately. The sound changed the room more than any monitor reading had. It made Bay 3 feel less like a battlefield and more like a place where wounded people could still be human. Cole watched her laugh disappear. You got that from him. No, she said, I got the stubbornness. Vega muttered under his breath. That tracks. Cole glanced at him. "You got a comment, Corporal?" "No gunny." Briggs looked down very quickly at the floor. The X-ray tech arrived again, this time more careful with the room and its patient. She announced herself before crossing the threshold, every movement named before it happened. Cole tolerated the repeat film with gritted patience and no argument, which by now counted as full cooperation. Sadie helped to position him just enough for the image. Her hand braced his upper back, visible, steady, no surprises. He accepted the support without acknowledging it. That counted too. The plate clicked. The machine rolled back out. Blake waited for the image to load. The room seemed to breathe around the monitor. When the film appeared, he stepped closer, zoomed, enlarged the left field. Sadie watched his face. The silence lasted half a second too long. She felt the shift in her own body before he spoke. Cole saw it and read her instantly. What? Blake did not answer immediately. He studied the image once more, then looked at the bedside monitor as if confirming what he already knew. Pneumo is larger. The words landed flat and hard. Vega pushed off the wall. Briggs went pale again. Cole's eyes narrowed on the image on the white and gray landscape of his own chest. How much larger? Enough, Blake said. You are not going upstairs with that. The room began moving before anyone spoke again. Blake reached for the procedure tray. Tessa appeared almost instantly from the hallway, as if she had sensed the change in airflow. A respiratory therapist came in on her heels. Another nurse rolled the chest tube cart to the foot of the bed. Cole looked at the tray, then at Blake, and all the old resistance flashed back into his face at once. Number. The word cracked through the bay with more force than he had used all night. Sadie was already at his side. Cole. His breathing sharpened. No tube. Blake did not waste time. You need one. It was small 10 minutes ago. It is not small now. I can still breathe. And you may not in another 10. Cole's hand found the rail again and clamped down so hard the tendons stood out like cords under the skin. Sadie saw his shoulders go rigid not only from pain, but from the shape of the procedure itself. He was not refusing medicine now. He was refusing violation. A cut, a tube, a loss of bodily control so direct it would light up every alarm already wired into him. Blake stripped open the sterile pack. Quinn talked to him while I set up. Sadie leaned in until she had his full attention. Look at me. He did. That alone cost him. Nobody is doing anything without your yes, she said. Blake glanced up sharply. Sadie. She did not take her eyes off Cole. He needs to hear the truth the right way. Tessa stepped to Blake's side and began opening sterile supplies with efficient hands. She said nothing. That was agreement enough. Cole swallowed against pain. Do not make this sound noble. I am not. Sadie kept her voice low, steady, impossible to mistake for comfort. Your lung is losing space. That is all this is. Mechanics. A tube restores mechanics. He stared at her as if searching for weakness, softness, manipulation. There was none. You putting it in. A beat. Blake answered before she could. I am. Cole's gaze cut away from Sadie for the first time in several minutes, pinned Blake in place, then came back to her. Then you stay where I can see you. I will. No one behind me. We will position everyone. No hands until I know whose. You will know. He inhaled carefully, and the breath frayed halfway in. His pain was climbing again now faster than the medication could outpace. The monitor told the story in bright green numbers. So did the hollowed look around his eyes. Sadie reached for the edge of the blanket at the foot of the bed and drew it up over his legs, not for warmth, but for weight. Something grounding, something that made the bed feel less exposed. Tell me the procedure, he said. She did, every step. We numbed the left side. Small incision between the ribs. Tube into the pleural space to evacuate air. You will feel pressure, you will feel pain. Then breathing should improve. How bad? The numbing burns. The rest hurts. Then it gets easier. Vega looked down at the floor tiles as if they had become intensely interesting. Briggs had both fists clenched. Cole kept his eyes on Sadie. You always sell things this badly. Only when lying would make me slower. He absorbed that. He always did. Blake pulled sterile gloves on and stepped to the left side of the bed. "Gunny, I need your answer now." Cole was silent. The whole room held. Sadie watched the conflict move through him in real time. Pride, pain, memory. Every lesson drilled into him by years of service, and every instinct that kept a man alive in places where surrender invited harm. Saying yes in this room was not a small thing. It was not routine consent. It was trust under pressure, given with the understanding that trust could still wound him if placed wrong. His hand loosened on the rail, then tightened again. Finally, he said, "Do it." Nobody in the room exhaled visibly, but the change was there in all of them. Blake nodded once. "All right." The bay became all motion after that. Tessa positioned the sterile drape. The respiratory therapist increased oxygen. Another nurse checked suction. Sadie moved to Cole's right side where his line of sight could hold her and no one else had reason to cross it. Vega and Briggs stepped to the foot of the bed where he could still see them. Blake lifted a syringe, local anesthetic. Sadie echoed for Cole burning first. The needle entered. Cole's face hardened into stone. His breath caught hard on the second infiltration. His right hand dug into the rail forearm, rigid jaw clenched so tight that the muscles jumped. "That's the worst of the burn," Sadie said. He did not answer. Sweat had broken fully now at his temples along the line of his hair above his upper lip. The monitor ticked fast and uneven. Blake palpated the landmark between the ribs. "Incision." "Sharp pressure," Sadie said. The scalpel moved. Cole did not make a sound. That somehow made the room tenser. Tessa looked at the suction tubing, ready. Blake inserted the clamp with measured precision, working through tissue toward the pleural space. The pressure on the bed changed. Cole's whole torso went rigid. A low, rough sound escaped him this time. Not loud, not even a true groan, just the body's involuntary answer to steel and pain. Sadie held his gaze. "Stay with me." He was already somewhere very tight inside himself, in that narrow place where trained men go when suffering has to be turned into sequence. She could see it. The focus too sharp. The eyes too still. "Cole," she said again, "look at me." His eyes found hers. "There," she said, "right here." Blake advanced the tube. A hiss of escaping air followed, wet and immediate, the sound ugly and beautiful all at once. The effect on Cole was not instant, but it came fast. His chest gave one involuntary shudder, then another. Then the next inhale reached deeper than the last 10 had. Pain still lived in the movement. So did relief. "Tube is in," Blake said. Tessa connected suction. The collection chamber fluttered. Sadie watched the monitor. 93 saturation. 95. Heart rate slowly descending. Cole's eyes had lost some of their knife edge, though his face was still drawn hard with the aftermath. The hand on the rail loosened one finger at a time. Blake secured the tube with sutures and dressing efficient and spare. "You did fine." Cole gave him a look that would have peeled paint off the wall. "Not a dog." "No," Blake said. "Dogs are usually easier." Tessa made a noise that might have been a hidden laugh. Briggs definitely laughed and then looked startled by himself. Even Vega's mouth moved. The room needed it. The sound let pressure vent somewhere other than the collection chamber. Sadie handed Blake fresh gauze and checked the dressing as he finished taping the tube in place. "Hold still, one more second." "I would like the record to show," Cole said through a shallow breath, "that this place is a scam." Sadie adjusted the edge of the dressing. "You signed nothing. Hard to call it fraud." His eyes stayed on her. Tired now, pain-lined, but no longer armored in quite the same way. Once the tube was secured, Blake stepped back and stripped off his gloves. "Repeat film in 15. If that lung stays up, he goes to step down." Tessa began clearing used packaging with the ruthless speed of someone who had no emotional interest in mess. "I will get the transfer paperwork started." The respiratory therapist lowered the oxygen flow slightly and watched the monitor trend. "Breathing already looks better." It did. Sadie could see it even before the numbers confirmed it. The left side still lagged a little, but the movement had opened. Air was getting where it needed to go. She took a clean cloth and wiped the sweat from just above Cole's temple, because no one else in the room had the right to do it. He let her. That was maybe the clearest sign of all. Vega stepped a little closer to the bed. Gunny. Cole turned his head toward him with visible effort. If you ask if I am okay, I am demoting you in spirit. Vega's shoulders shook once with a contained laugh. Copy that. Briggs looked at the chest tube setup with undisguised horror. Does that thing stay in? Sadie answered without looking away from the dressing she was checking. For now. Briggs nodded, as if that made perfect sense and no sense at all. Blake entered a few notes into the chart, then looked at Cole again. You bought yourself more time to be difficult. Glad to hear my options remain open. Blake gave one short nod and stepped out to call the admitting team. The intensity in the bay drained by degrees after that. Not gone, just transformed. The procedure was over. The immediate threat had shape now. The room no longer needed to brace for a collision every few seconds. Tessa gathered wrappers into a red biohazard bag and looked at Sadie as she tied it closed. 11 days in trauma and already negotiating with gunnery sergeants and assisting on chest tubes. Sadie did not look up. I like a calm night. Tessa snorted and rolled the cart away. Briggs finally sat down on the edge of the chair by the wall, as if his knees had remembered they existed. Vega remained standing, but some of the strain had gone out of him too. He watched Cole the way a man watches a leader who has survived something none of them will ever speak of casually. Sadie checked the IV and started a new bag of fluids. Cole tracked the movement, but now there was no challenge in it. Only fatigue and the habit of awareness. You still with me? She asked. He kept his gaze on the clear line of fluid for a moment. Against my better judgment. Good. His eyes moved up to hers. You always this pleased when people ignore their instincts for you. She hung the new bag on the pole. Only when their instincts are trying to collapse a lung. He let his head settle back against the pillow and closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them again, they found the tattoo on her forearm where the sleeve had slipped back during the procedure. You kept your word. Sadie followed his gaze, then tugged the cuff slightly lower. About staying. About all of it. She met his eyes. So did you. He looked almost puzzled. I let you cut a hole in me. You said yes before anyone touched you. A quiet settled between them. Not empty. Waited. Vega glanced toward the hallway and then back. Gunny Command's going to ask questions. Cole's mouth flattened. They always do. You want me to make the call. Later. Sadie adjusted the monitor lead that had begun peeling again. You can let them wait 10 minutes. Cole looked at her. You giving me permission now? Yes. That new. You are in my bay. That finally drew a real smile out of him, small and brief, but impossible to mistake. It changed Briggs's face to relief, opening across it like a light turning on. Vega looked down and shook his head once, as if to himself. The blood pressure cuff cycled again. 98/62. Sadie saw it first, then Cole, then Vega, who had learned to read the screen over her shoulder. Better, Vega said before he could stop himself. Cole did not look at him. Careful. But there was no sting in it this time. The repeat X-ray arrived on the portable monitor a little while later. Blake returned to review it, one hand in his pocket, reading the film with the same measured calm he had shown all night. The left lung now sat where it belonged. The pneumo had retreated. The tube was well placed. He gave the screen one final look and nodded. That will do. Sadie heard the satisfaction beneath the flat tone. Blake turned to the bed. Step-down unit has a room. Telemetry overnight. Trauma service in the morning. Cole absorbed that without visible emotion. The hardest part of the night had already happened. Everything after that was just endurance. Blake added, You are not driving anywhere. You are not signing out. You are not proving a point. Cole's eyes drifted closed and opened again. You people never stop talking. Correct, Blake said. That is how we keep patients alive. He left the room to finish the admission order. The bay quieted again. Not the earlier quiet edged with confrontation, but the quieter aftermath of people returning to normal breathing. Sadie began coiling unused tubing and organizing the tray, resetting one piece of the room at a time because motion helped after adrenaline. Her hands moved through familiar sequences. Cap, fold, dispose label, clean, check, the ordinary rituals of emergency medicine. Quiet work after loud risk. Cole watched her for a moment, then said, "You move like a corpsman still." She did not stop working. "I move like someone who hates wasted steps." That, too. She looked over at him. "How is the breathing?" He took one measured inhale and let it out slower. "Better. Pain. Still there. Less." He gave a short nod. "Good." Another silence passed. Briggs stood again, restless now that sitting had proven possible. Vega stepped out into the hall to make a brief call, voice low and careful beyond the curtain line. The bay shrank to 2 people and the machinery around them. Cole looked at the ceiling and then back at her. "You ever go to his memorial?" Sadie knew immediately who he meant. Her hands paused on a strip of tape. "At Pendleton." He nodded once. "I was there." She looked at him for a second longer than usual. "I know." That surprised him. "Your face was different," she said, less tired. He let out the faintest breath of humor. "That was a long time ago." "Yes." The monitor continued its soft, steady pulse above them. The chest tube chamber fluttered lightly, with each breath no longer dramatic, just functional. Cole's gaze settled on her forearm once more. "You did not get the tattoo for him alone. Number. For the unit. For what it asked of people." He held that answer for a moment. "That is closer." Sadie folded the last piece of packaging and dropped it into the bin. "You should rest. I do not rest well in hospitals." I noticed, but his eyes had already lost some of their fight. Pain medication and exhaustion, and the first deep breaths in over an hour, were beginning to pull him toward the edge of sleep whether he liked it or not. Sadie moved to the bedside and checked the dressing one more time. Clean. Dry. Secure. He watched her hand, then her face. "Quinn." "Yes. If they move me upstairs before shift change." "They will." His eyes stayed on hers, steady despite the fatigue. "Tell the next nurse not to come at me from the blind side. I will tell them myself." He gave one slow nod. That was enough for now. Bay 3 had changed shape entirely. The wariness remained. The pain remained. The tube at his side and the bruising under the torn field jacket remained. But something else now lived there too. Something built in the narrow passage between pain and procedure, between command and care. Not surrender. Never that. Just a truce strong enough to carry him through the rest of the night. Not surrender. Never that. Just a truce strong enough to carry him through the rest of the night. The hour after crisis always felt stranger to Sadie than the crisis itself. Emergency had shape. It had pace, sequence, consequence. There was always a monitor to answer, a tray to open, a call to make before the next number dipped lower. But the quiet after intervention was its own terrain. Softer. Less dramatic. Sometimes more dangerous, because that was when everything people had held at bay began slipping back through the cracks. Bay 3 had settled into a low, electric hum. The monitor now traced a steadier rhythm over Cole Mercer's bed. The chest tube chamber fluttered with each breath, no longer frantic, just functional. The oxygen under his nose remained in place, though by now he seemed too tired to resent it properly. The field jacket still lay folded across the chair where Tessa had placed it, mud on the cuffs, one seam cut clean, where the scissors had finally gone through after the procedure. The room looked almost orderly again. Almost. Sadie checked the transfer orders on the chart tablet and made a few corrections where the admitting team had misread one of the CT notes. She had learned quickly that small mistakes multiplied when no one caught them early. Pulmonary contusion, left lower lobe. Chest tube to suction. Telemetry. Repeat film at dawn. Pain control with caution. Observe for worsening respiratory distress. Trauma service in the morning. Ordinary words on a screen. Nothing about the night felt ordinary. Cole kept his eyes closed for several breaths at a time now, though Sadie could tell he was not asleep. His face had changed under the pain medication. Not softened exactly. More stripped down. The discipline remained, but the effort behind it had become visible. The lines around his mouth looked carved rather than held. The skin under his eyes had gone shadowed and drawn. A man like him could carry a great deal before it showed. Tonight had finally forced some of it into the light. Vega finished his call in the hallway and came back inside, stepping carefully so the curtain would not snap too loudly on the rail. "Command knows he is staying," he said, keeping his voice low. "They will send somebody from the unit in the morning." Cole opened one eye. "You make it sound like I got arrested." Vega let out a short breath that might have been relief. "No, Gunny." "Then stop sounding guilty." "Yes, Gunny." Briggs, still occupying the chair by the wall, like he did not trust his legs to fully belong to him yet, looked up. They asked what happened. Vega glanced toward Sadie and then back at Cole. "I told them rollover during training and medical evaluation is ongoing." Cole closed his eye again. "Smartest thing you have said all night." Briggs smiled despite himself. Sadie finished adjusting the settings on the transport monitor and unplugged the wall lead. Step down called. "Room is ready." Cole's eyes opened again. "How many people are waiting up there to ask me stupid questions?" "Probably fewer than down here," Sadie said. "That is not the comfort you think it is. It was not meant as comfort." He looked at her for a beat, then let the corner of his mouth move. It was gone in a second, but it had become less rare now, these small involuntary betrayals of humanity. Sadie saw Vega notice it too, and quickly look away, giving the moment privacy out of instinct rather than instruction. Tessa entered with a clipboard tucked under one arm and a disposable cup of coffee in the other. She had the particular expression of someone who had seen enough difficult nights to identify the exact moment a room stops belonging to chaos and starts belonging to paperwork. "Transport is 5 minutes out," she said. "Telemetry nurse already called twice. She sounds organized, which is suspicious." Sadie took the clipboard from her. "I will give bedside handoff. You better." Upstairs, nurses eat new trauma staff for sport. Sadie signed one form without looking up. "I have been told." Tessa sipped the coffee, then glanced at Cole. "You doing all right, Sergeant?" Cole looked at her. "That depends how loose your definition is." Tessa nodded, as if that were the correct answer. "Good. Keep that attitude. It annoys people into survival." She left as quickly as she had come. Briggs watched her go. She always liked that. Sadie did not look up from the chart. "Worse when she likes you." Vega gave a quiet laugh. Cole looked almost amused by the exchange, and then tiredness overtook the expression. The room fell still again for a minute. Monitors. Breath. Rain fading somewhere beyond the windows. Wheels passing in the hall. A phone ringing at the central desk. The familiar low machinery of a hospital continuing through the night with no concern for the private significance of a single room. Sadie moved to the supply cart and started clearing what remained from the procedure. Most of it had already been handled, but she preferred her own order when handing off a room. Chest tube kit wrappers gone. Extra syringes counted. Sharps container checked. Biohazard bag sealed. It was a ritual as much as a task, one that let the mind settle after adrenaline. Her hands knew the sequence before thought did. Cole watched her for a while. She could feel it without turning around. "You do that every time," he said. She capped a saline flush and set it in the drawer. "Do what?" "Reset the room before you leave it." "Yes." "Why?" "Because the next person bleeding through those doors should not pay for the last one." Vega looked down. Briggs shifted in his chair. Cole held her gaze a second longer than usual when she turned back toward the bed. That sounds military. It sounds organized. No, he said. It sounds military. Sadie let the distinction sit there without arguing it. A transport orderly appeared at the doorway with a fresh gurney and a practiced expression that turned slightly more alert when he recognized the setup in the room. Ready for step down, he said. Sadie checked the side rails herself. Give me 2 minutes. The orderly nodded and waited outside. Blake returned before anyone could move the bed. He had changed gloves and looked mildly more tired than he had an hour ago, though his voice remained exactly the same. Repeat film at dawn is in. Trauma service knows he is coming. Telemetry is aware of the chest tube and the contusion. He stepped to the bedside and looked at Cole. You have any dramatic plans between now and morning that I should document? Cole looked at him through the oxygen tubing. Depends. How is the coffee upstairs? Terrible. Then, no. Blake nodded once. Excellent. He checked the dressing at the tube site with a quick professional glance. If your breathing worsens, if the pain changes, if the suction gets disconnected, you call the nurse. You do not decide to be stoic as a hobby. Cole's eyes shifted toward Sadie for half a second at the last sentence. Blake caught it and almost smiled. Apparently, she has been educating you, he said. Cole did not answer. Blake looked at Sadie. You riding up with him? It was not a question. She nodded. I will hand off in the room. Good. He turned back to the bed. You gave us a rough start, Gunny. Cole answered with the driest voice he could still manage. You brought scissors into the conversation. Blake actually smiled then, brief and reluctant. Fair enough. He stepped out, already reaching for his phone, already moving on to the next demand of the shift. Sadie gathered the transport monitor leads and switched them over one by one. Every move announced, every cable visible. Cole tracked the process with less effort than before, but the habit remained. He still wanted to know what the room was doing to him and when. She respected that enough to keep naming every touch. Changing leads. A nod. Moving your IV pump to the transport pole. A nod. Unlocking left rail. His fingers tightened once reflexively, then eased. Vega stepped closer. Need me on the head end? Sadie looked at him. At the foot, where he can see you. Vega nodded at once. Briggs stood too quickly and nearly knocked the chair into the wall. He caught it before it made too much noise, flushing like a kid caught doing something foolish. Cole turned his head toward him. Relax, Briggs. Yes, Gunny. It was not a threat. Yes, Gunny. Vega muttered, this is him relaxed. Briggs tried and failed not to smile. When they moved Cole from the trauma bed to the transport gurney, the pain found him again in a sharp, bright line across the left ribs. His breath hitched, his jaw locked. Sadie kept one hand near his shoulder where he could see it and counted the turn exactly. No surprises. No blind contact. The old agreement still held. Almost there, she said. He settled against the new mattress with a grimace that did not fully leave for several seconds. Still hate hospitals, he said. Noted. The orderly latched the rails. Vega took the foot end. Briggs stayed where instructed, visible and quiet. Sadie walked at the right side with the IV pole. The portable monitor rode above them with its green pulse tracing and yellow oxygen number. The chest tube chamber hung secured below, swinging only slightly as the gurney began to roll. The hallway outside trauma was brighter than Bay 3 had been, less intimate, more public. Staff moved around them with that practiced half-awareness hospital workers develop, taking in the chest tube, the oxygen, the Marines at the bedside, and adjusting their path without staring too openly. A housekeeper paused with her cart against the wall to let them pass. A resident doctor coming the other direction glanced at the monitor, read the room in one sweep, and moved on. Cole kept his eyes open the entire time. You ever stop scanning? Sadie asked quietly. His gaze stayed on the corridor ahead. Not on nights like this. Fair. The elevator arrived with a soft bell and opened on an empty car. Better luck than before. Vega maneuvered the foot end in first. Sadie kept herself in Cole's line of sight while the orderly locked the wheels. The elevator doors slid shut. Metal walls. bright reflection, tight space. The old tension touched his face again, though not as violently as before. Sadie saw it the second it landed. She shifted a half step so his line of vision held both her and the door panel. "Third floor," she said. "You always narrate elevators." "Yes." Still annoying. Still effective. Vega huffed one quiet laugh into his sleeve. When the doors opened to step down, the floor was dimmer than the ER. Nightlights glowed along the baseboards. The hall smelled less of antiseptic and more of linen and stale coffee. Fewer alarms, softer shoes, more sleep pressed into the walls. A nurse with a clipboard stood outside room 318 waiting for them. She was in her 50s, silver threaded through dark hair, expression alert without being rushed. Her badge read, "Karen Delaney." "You the famous trauma patient," she said lightly as they approached. Cole looked at Sadie, not at Karen. Sadie almost smiled. "Karen, this is Gunnery Sergeant Cole Mercer. Left-sided rib fractures, pulmonary contusion, chest tube to suction for expanding, pneumo stable after placement, pressure improved, but still soft. He needs all contact verbalized before touch and nobody approaching from his blind side without warning." Karen's eyes flicked to Sadie's face, then to Cole, then to the chest tube. She took it in faster than most. Understood. Cole finally looked at her, assessing, not hostile, waiting. Karen stepped to the side so he had a clear view of her and the room at once. "I talk first, move second," she said. "That work for you?" A beat. Then Cole gave a small nod. Sadie saw the relief that flickered across Karen's face before professionalism flattened it again. Good nurse, she thought. Fast learner, too. They rolled him into room 318. Single room. Telemetry monitor. Window dark with the last of the rain. Recliner near the wall. Whiteboard already labeled with date and night nurse name. The bed was narrower than the trauma gurney, but cleaner, quieter, more private. Less battlefield, more aftermath. The transfer from gurney to inpatient bed went easier this time because everyone in the room now understood the rules. Karen announced her hand placements. The orderly counted. Sadie stayed visible at the shoulder. Vega and Briggs remained where Cole could see them. The movement still hurt him. That did not change, but it no longer triggered the same sense of threat. Once he was settled, Karen connected the wall monitor, checked suction at the chest tube chamber, and confirmed the IV rate with Sadie. "Pain now?" she asked, looking at Cole instead of the chart. He took one measured breath before answering. Manageable. Karen gave him the kind of look only veteran nurses can produce, one that acknowledged the answer while refusing to be fooled by it. "That was not a number, but I can work with it." Sadie gave handoff in concise detail. Mechanism of injury. Delayed respiratory decline. Resistance to initial treatment. CT findings. Tube placement. Response after intervention. Need for clear verbal cues before touch. The handoff lasted less than 2 minutes and contained more trust than some entire shifts. Karen asked the right questions, no extras. When it was done, she looked at Sadie and said, "I have him." Sadie nodded. She believed her. That should have been the end of it. Clean handoff. Room transferred. Trauma nurse back to the ER. Another patient already probably arriving downstairs. But the room held for 1 second longer than procedure required, as if no one wanted to break the line all at once. Vega checked the time on his watch and looked at Cole. "Gunny, I can stay till First Sergeant sends somebody." Cole's eyes moved to him. "Go get dry first." Vega hesitated. "You sure? I'm not adopting you in a hospital room, Corporal." That got a grin out of Vega whether he wanted one or not. "Copy." Briggs hovered by the door, uncertain. He looked younger again, under the softer lights of the floor. "Gunny." Cole turned his head a fraction. Briggs swallowed once. "Glad you are still yelling at people." The room went still. For one brief second, emotion showed too nakedly on the kid's face, and everyone saw it. Fear. Relief. Loyalty so raw it had nowhere polished to stand. Cole held his gaze. Then he said low and steady, Get some rack time, Briggs. The kid nodded too fast. Yes, Gunny. He turned away, immediately embarrassed by his own honesty. Vega caught Sadie's eye on the way out. Thank you. She shook her head once. He did the hard part. Vega looked back at Cole, then at her forearm, where the tattoo had partly vanished again beneath the cuff of her sleeve. Understanding moved across his face in silence. He gave one small respectful nod and guided Briggs into the hall. The room quieted. Karen adjusted the blanket over Cole's legs, announced the movement before she touched anything. Then checked the dressing at the tube site one more time. I am down the hall if you need me. I mean that literally. Do not impress me with silence. Cole looked at her. I will consider disappointing you. Karen nodded. Excellent. We are starting from honesty. She stepped out, leaving the door partly open. For the first time since the ambulance doors downstairs, the room held only 2 people. Sadie stood near the foot of the bed with the chart tablet still in hand and no real reason left to stay. She should have turned for the door already. Bay 3 would need resetting again. Tessa would absolutely have a comment prepared. Another patient would fill the vacuum by instinct. Hospitals hated empty space. But Cole was watching her with that same steady, unreadable focus he had worn from the start, and beneath it now was something else. Not dependence. Recognition. You should go, he said. Yes. She did not move. He noticed that too. The monitor beside him traced a softer rhythm than it had in the ER. The chest tube chamber fluttered gently with each breath. The room lights were dim enough now that the lines in his face had eased, though fatigue had settled fully into him. He looked older here than he had downstairs. Not weaker, just less lit by adrenaline. Sadie set the chart tablet on the counter by the sink. Karen is good. I know. You assessed her in under 10 seconds. I had practice. She nodded toward the room door. No one comes at you from the blind side. She heard me. She did. Another quiet settled. Cole looked at the dark window and then back at her. You knew Mason. It was not really a question. More like he was placing the memory in its final slot. I knew who he was before I knew you were there, she said. At the memorial. His eyes narrowed, slightly searching. That was years ago. You stood in the second row. Something changed in his face then. A tiny movement of surprise. Not it being remembered exactly, but it being remembered by someone he had failed to notice. He talked about his sister once, Cole said. Sadie waited. Said she was smarter than he was, and meaner when it counted. She let out one slow breath, part laugh, part ache. That sounds like him too. He watched her a second longer, as if checking whether the mention of Mason had wounded her open or steadied her instead. Whatever he saw seemed to answer its own question. Cole turned his head toward the chair where his field jacket had been draped over the transport rail. Jacket pocket. Sadie frowned slightly. What? Left breast pocket. She crossed to the chair, lifted the jacket carefully, and found the pocket by touch. Inside was a coin worn smooth at the edges from years of being carried. A challenge coin. Marine Corps crest on one side. Unit mark on the other. Scratched metal, real weight. She looked at it, then back at him. Cole. Take it. Number. His eyes stayed on hers. That was not an offer out of politeness. I know what it is. Then take it. Sadie held the coin in her palm. Its edges had been handled so many times that they no longer felt sharp. There were years in that metal. Sweat deployments, pockets, reminders. Not a trinket. Not something handed out lightly. You should keep it, she said. His gaze did not waver. I did, long enough. The room seemed to narrow around the object in her hand. She crossed back to the bed slowly. Why? Cole looked at the coin, then at the tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve. Because you still know what it means. That answer landed harder than she expected. Not because it was generous. Because it was exact. She closed her fingers around the coin, the metal warm now from her hand. I cannot take this as a souvenir. That is good, he said. I am not giving you one. For the first time all night, she did not have a quick reply ready. She slipped the coin into the breast pocket of her scrub top beneath her badge, not display, not sentiment. Just secure placement. When she looked back at him, something in his face had eased further. Not relief. Completion. He shifted slightly against the pillow and winced. Even now, the pain was there, threaded through every movement. The chest tube line tugged. The ribs would hurt for weeks. The lung would take its time. Bodies were slow, even when men were not. Sadie stepped close enough to check the dressing at his side one last time. Clean, dry, stable. "You need anything before I go?" Cole looked up at her. The room held in the low quiet of machines and distant hallway footsteps. Then he said very simply, "No." A beat. "Then you did not treat me like I was broken." The words were quieter than any of the refusal that had come before them, and because of that they carried more weight. Sadie met his eyes. "You were not broken." He held the look measuring, confirming, storing it somewhere he would likely never name. Then he gave one slow nod. That was thanks. Not polished, not ceremonial, not easier because the night had softened around them. Real thanks. Sadie reached up and pulled her sleeve down over the tattoo again. Not to hide it exactly, just to return the room to its ordinary shape. She picked up the chart tablet from the counter and turned toward the door. Behind her, Cole said Quinn. She paused and looked back. The oxygen tubing rested lightly against his face. The monitor traced him in green. The room light cut soft along the angles of his jaw. He looked tired enough now that sleep might finally take him by force, but his eyes were fully clear. "Tell Trauma downstairs," he said, "that their coffee is worse than military issue." Sadie stared at him for 1 second, then let out the quietest laugh of the night. "I will put it in the official report." "Good." She stepped into the doorway, then looked back once more. Cole had already closed his eyes, not in collapse, not in defeat, just in the guarded surrender of a man who had fought long enough to know when rest had finally been earned. One hand lay open on the blanket now instead of locked around a rail. The chest tube chamber moved with his breathing. In, out, functional, human, alive. Karen glanced up from the desk in the hall. "All set." Sadie nodded. "All set." She walked back toward the elevator with the challenge coin warm against her chest and the smell of antiseptic fading behind her. The hallway lights hummed. Somewhere downstairs an alarm began sounding in short, urgent bursts, and she knew before the elevator doors even opened that Bay 3 would not stay empty long. When she reached the trauma floor again, Tessa was already stripping the bed. "How is our favorite Marine?" she asked without looking up. Sadie moved to the sink and washed her hands, watching diluted blood and saline circle the drain. Still difficult. Tessa gave a satisfied nod. "Excellent." Sadie dried her hands and reached automatically for a fresh stack of gauze. The room smelled like antiseptic clean linen and the faint metallic edge that follows procedure no matter how quickly you clean. Bay 3 stood under bright lights again, blank and waiting, as if none of the night's tension had ever lived inside it. She checked the suction canister, restocked flushes, straightened the monitor cables, reset the room one movement at a time until the geometry felt right again. Tessa noticed the edge of metal at Sadie's pocket when she bent to close the lower drawer. Her eyes narrowed. "What is that?" Sadie slid the drawer shut. "Nothing for inventory." Tessa studied her for a second, then decided whatever answer existed would arrive in its own time. Fair enough. The overhead speaker crackled. Another inbound, another set of vitals, another problem rolling through the doors under cold lights. Sadie clipped her badge, straight-squared the tray, and glanced once at the closed doors of Bay 3. Then she looked away and moved toward the next call. The hospital did what it always did. It kept going, but beneath her badge, where no one else could see it, the coin rested against the fabric of her scrub top with the quiet weight of recognition carried forward.